And that's what I think is the key to this episode. It is really, Ray Dalio's talking about how do you do work that you love, that's meaningful, that you're passionate about, that adds meaning to your life, but also surrounded by people that you love, that you're passionate about. That's where life gets fun.
Welcome to the holiday edition of your podcast, my friend.
Woo.
Woohoo! We're in an unusual place today. We are not at my studio in Tampa, Florida. We are not at your studio of choice in Leamington Spa at Mill Street Studios. We are actually in, well, there's really no other way to say it. We are in a castle, not in the UK, at a friend of ours who was kind enough to let us shoot his podcast in his castle, who is a brilliant entrepreneur who took some big swings at a young age, but not only had big swings, but also knew how to run the bases when he got there as well. And as a result, he's done very well for himself. And we're sitting in one of his many salons in this 40-plus room mansion, castle. And what a great experience for us to be here shooting a holiday New Year's podcast.
Oh, perfect example. Right? It's a chance to reflect. There's a big group of us here, and we're having a big party, but it's a good time to reflect. And what an inspirational environment to really.
Yeah. So we're not actually following our normal format where we talk about Hero of the Week and News of the Week. We're just going to do a recap of 2022, set up for 2023, and let people get back to their holidays.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think for me, I'm a big fan of reflecting on lessons learned, right? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times the biggest change I've had in the last 10 years so far has been away from goal setting almost.
Yeah.
And realizing, not the fallacy in that, but actually the key is what are the lessons learned so you can take any wins, what created you wins, how can you carry those forwards? But simultaneously, what were the mistakes that you made and how do you make sure you don't repeat them again?
So let's do this. Let's talk about what are those mistakes? Like what are our biggest lessons that we learned? In fact, here's what I'd love to do. You share with me one of your biggest lessons of the year and how I could benefit. I'll share with you one of my biggest lessons and how you could benefit. And then let's talk about one of our biggest passions, best book of the year.
Good.
Yeah. And what your big takeaway was from it. And then also maybe why don't we talk about a strategy for success in the future for 2023, right? Yeah, so I'll let you start. Let's go for biggest lesson, learning, mistake, whatever you want to call it.
So my biggest lesson of this year, which it sounds arrogant, but I promise you there's a lesson in here. My biggest lesson was I was too profitable. Too much profit.
Yep. Yeah, we had this conversation in July, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. Because kind of in my main business, I'd had 14 consecutive back-to-back quarters of growth of revenue and profit. So multiple years, right? So 3.5 years of every quarter, better, more, highly cash flow positive. And it was unbelievable. However, here's where I made a mistake. I got complacent because it was coming too easily. I failed to plant the seeds.
Was it complacency or was it, my cash flow is getting stronger and stronger, and you just got to where there was almost like this self-reinforcing positivity of like being able to see the cash flow continuing to grow? Because I would never, ever use the word complacent to describe you.
Yeah, thank you. That's fair. But I think this is where sometimes the dichotomy of goal setting is if you become obsessed with the goal rather than the thing that causes that goal.
Yeah.
So because I'd had so many quarters of the number improved, you start going, oh my God, I can only do things that are going to improve the profits this quarter. It's not dissimilar than public companies always talk about, they've got to have the earnings for the market, right? So the share price doesn't get hit. And then they get into short-term games, which are about this quarter, not about next year or the year after.
Yeah.
All right. I know it's a holiday edition, but I've got to get a Buffett quote in here, right? It's gonna. He's not interested in short-term fluctuations. He's interested in the long-term intrinsic value.
Yeah.
So for me, because all of a sudden it's like, another quarter, we've done it again. All of a sudden, when I say complacency, it was my ego was wanting to keep hitting that record. And what that meant was, and what that means to the listeners is, I wasn't doing enough long-term seed planting.
Yeah.
So I was too profitable because I was high margin and I wasn't spending.
Meaning you weren't reinvesting those profits back into growth to get more.
There wasn't enough being reinvested to allow for the next stage of growth. And there were some shifts and hires I needed to make and some capital outlay, which wasn't done. Yeah. And of course, the bigger your company gets, typically, the further into the future you need to see, right? It takes long, like, you know, when
Say
you're
that again. The bigger your company gets, the further into the future you need to see.
That's it. That's it. Because when you're a startup, you can have an idea and just go, I'll change it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But where if you're a massive conglomerate,
Yeah.
and you've got thousands of staff, you have to see further ahead. And sometimes what you're doing in the short term is bad for profits, but you're laying a foundation to reap the rewards. So it's harvesting. It's planting the seeds.
Yeah.
So you can reap the harvest in the future. And I was negligent, I think, which meant that my growth, and here's how people listening might see it, my growth had shot up, but it was beginning to slow.
You could see the plateau coming.
Right.
Yes.
And yet, then I course corrected and made some of the investments. And I remember having to go, look, emotionally going, I need to appreciate this next quarter or the next several quarters are going to be, we're going to break the record, as in, the streak is going to be broken.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it's like, it's not and that has emotionally had a bit of a demoralizing effect. So I had to shift and go, no, we're going to have multiple quarters where the investment before we're seeing any reward. So for me, that was the biggest lesson. So the lesson to the listener is, where do you need to invest more? Where do you need to plant seeds now so you can reap the rewards in the future?
Yeah, good. All right, love that one. All right, mine was an interesting one because I think we always hear about how you have to kind of shut down, disconnect, take time off from your business in order to grow your business. And we hear it all the time, 24/7, 7 days a week, and we never listen to it. And I'm guilty of that, man. I can't tell you the last time I took a vacation. I just don't know, right? And if I did, it was a half-assed one because I was checking my emails and that kind of stuff as well, right? And this year, and you know this, I had an opportunity to go down to Bosham, I think that's what's called. A little seaside village in the UK. I went down with my dog Macy, and I didn't bring the laptop.
Nice.
Didn't do any social media, anything. It was just me, my dog Macy, the beach, walking trails, and it was 3 days of bliss. And the weird thing is, I came back and I had the most productive week I had in easily a decade. Sadly, probably 2, but I'm almost ashamed to admit it.
Right.
Yeah, like it was just outstanding, and I've kept that productivity rolling now. And this was maybe 3-4 months ago that I did this, and just really understanding the value of that. And so I, even again on Christmas, went up to Keswick, the dog, no laptop, and just enjoyed myself. And I think that was a big lesson for me, was that in fact, there's actually a theory in it. It's called associative restoration theory, which is that when you're surrounded by nature, it increases your ability to focus. And I got that firsthand experience of that. So I think the biggest lesson for me was the reality that you need to get into nature more. And I know that kind of sounds a hokey, but how does that benefit you, the listeners? Is don't wait for those opportunities like I did to just happen when it was convenient. Schedule it. Sit down with your calendar for 2023 and say, 4 times a year, once a quarter, where can I take at least 3 days, if not a week, to just disconnect, turn off the computers, turn off the laptops, don't answer the phone calls, get out to nature, walk on a trail, anything and everything to just enjoy.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, it is a blast from the past. An early mentor of mine, to support that, Tova, early mentor of mine, a guy called Peter Thompson, said that the more holidays I take, the more money I make.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a little bit of a trite, a cute quote, but I found it to be true. So actually, that's the number one thing that I do when I do my scheduling for the year. The first thing my assistant does is put on the holidays.
Nice. Yeah.
Booking the holidays. Yeah. And the question for the listeners is, if you think about when do you have your best ideas?
Yeah.
And you think of the locations you're in when you have your best, most creative ideas, I guarantee, no matter what people say, whether they say in the shower, on vacation, at the spa, when I'm exercising, I guarantee nobody ever says when I'm at the office, when I'm working, right?
Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. All right, now let's talk book of the year. What is your favorite book of the year, and one key takeaway that you got from it?
It's so hard.
That's the problem of reading so many books, my friend.
So I'm going to go.
My job's easier. I didn't read as many.
So I'm going to go on with that. The caveat is I'm still reading it. I'm going to finish it on this trip.
Okay.
But it comes with high accolades.
Mm-hmm.
So, as any listener of this podcast will probably know, one of my longest standing business mentors is Keith J. Cunningham.
Yeah.
And Keith sent me an email.
Author of the book, The Road Less Stupid.
The Road Less Stupid.
One of your favorite books.
It's essential.
Yeah.
Essential. But I can't make it my book
yeah.
of the year every year.
Every year, right.
So, but he sent me an email a few weeks ago and said, this book, hands down, stop what you're doing, order this book. This book, hands down, is in my top 5, maybe even my top 3 business books of all time.
Wow.
And
that says a lot, right?
Well, Keith doesn't give out compliments lightly, and he's a prolific reader.
Yeah.
So the second he said that, I ordered it. I didn't even need to know anything.
Right.
And the book is called The Crux by a guy called Richard Rumel, who wrote another fabulous book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy.
One of my favorite books. Love it. Yeah.
Right. So, and the crux. So effectively, so here's the lesson. So the crux is actually an analogy from climbing, right? Whereas when you're climbing a route, the trickiest part of the route is called the crux. Yeah. So if you can figure out how to solve, because in climbing the route is called a problem. It's a problem. Yeah. What is the crux of the problem? The most difficult part. And so this book is founded on the premise that strategy is not about goal setting. Strategy is not about what are the milestones. Strategy is not about how are we going to get more customers. Strategy is saying, how do we solve the biggest problem? What is the root of the problem that prevents us from being where we want to be? So to be simplistic.
And does the book go into how to identify the cruxes, or you haven't got that far yet?
I was going to say I only just started, so I'm about halfway through. So I can't say it with full volition yet, but what I will say is it gives a lot of examples of big companies that have had either massive failures in strategy
because they couldn't identify the crux.
Correct, or they falsely, wrongly identified the crux, or ones that had massive successes because they did. Yeah. But it's a little bit too early to say whether or not it's...
Bro, did you just punch this in? Is this Keith Cunningham's favorite book, and you just phoned it in?
Well, I think you did. It's too early to say, but look, effectively, I kind of go, good enough for Keith Cunningham is good enough for me.
For us. Yeah, I would agree.
And for the first half that I've read, I think there is a lesson, like a key lesson, which I'm happy to say I've gotten so far. I just don't know all the details yet, but effectively, it's not about goal setting. Yeah. It's about identifying the obstacle. Right, that's what Keith would say, or identifying the crux, because the companies that hit it big aren't the ones that had the biggest vision. Some people will fight me on this. I'm probably going to get some hate on this comment over, but there's lots of people who have big visions. Act like visions is the only thing. Yeah. There's plenty of people with big visions that never hit it, never goes anywhere.
Plenty of people with passion that never hit it as well.
Correct. That's a prerequisite. So the question is, if you're going to make it to get from A to B, it's identifying the thing that's in the way, the obstacle that you've got to overcome, i.e. what's the crux of the problem. This book is littered with examples of businesses that have succeeded and failed because of their ability to identify and get to the crux of the problem or not. Yeah. Right? So, and that's where I kind of go, that's something for everybody to think about, whether they read the book, and I hope they do, or not, is, okay, what's the real obstacle? Because if you're driving hard and you're not making progress, the chances are it's because your ladder's up against the wrong wall. Yeah. You're not solving the crux of the problem.
Right. Yeah. All right, good. So my book will be Imaginable by Jane McGonigal. That is a mouthful. I loved that book. And basically the element of the book is this. So Jane McGonigal is a futurist. That's actually a job, by the way. And what's really cool she starts the book off talking about the pandemic, because years ago she did this massive study with, I can't remember how many people it was, but it was a pretty sufficient amount of individuals that did a simulation of a global pandemic. Right. And she was able to go to our government and literally tell them chapter and verse exactly what was going to happen. Now, whether they listened to her or not, I don't think happened, but she was able to predict with unbelievable accuracy that, like, the fundamental Christians would refuse to wear masks. They would not stop going to church. The 20-year-old college kids would still have underground parties or would create underground parties. The left would be indignant and make sure everybody's wearing masks. The right would want to, right? Like, all of this stuff happened, and she was able to predict with unbelievable accuracy. And that's cool, but what I thought was even cooler about the book was she followed up with the people that were in the study during the real pandemic, and what they reported is that they appeared to have, and yes, it's subjective, but they reported that they felt more in control, right? Less panicked, more certain about their future than people like you and I going through the pandemic where it was our first time. And what she was able to conclude from that was that when you can simulate in your mind worst case scenarios, if those scenarios occur, you can handle them with better grace, tact, and control.
Correct.
You know, and I think what a great thing for business where, but here's the crux of that, by the way, is that in order to do that, you need to be able to imagine the unimaginable.
Yes.
Right? The ludicrous, the unspeakable
100%.
things, right?
100%.
So if you can look at your business and say, what are the things that are unimaginable that could not possibly be a reality for our business? And then imagine those things and develop strategies for them. You will be more prepared if and when they actually happen.
Right. I mean,
very stoic philosophy.
I listened to an interview that she did, which spoke to this. And I thought it was great and profound because stoicism, but also in the investor world, it's called a pre-mortem.
Yeah.
So rather than
Gary
wait,
Klein, the creator of
correct.
pre-mortem.
Rather than wait till your business has failed and then go, oh, what happened? Actually, in advance, go, okay, now that I think about it, looking at the plan that we've got, let's imagine it didn't work. What was the most likely causes of death?
Yes.
Of the business.
Yes.
Great. And then you think of it in advance. Tim Ferriss would call it fear setting, right? Which is, it's not to replace goal setting. I'm in favor of being inspired and having a vision. But the fact is, obstacles are coming, right? So it's how well you handle and bounce back from those obstacles, or even better, avoid hitting them because you've considered the downsides. And a lot of people go, oh, it's negative thinking, like the secret. And it's like, oh, my word. Yeah. I'm in favor of having the vision and being excited and focused, but it's just smart. The obstacles will come. So I love that. Imaginable.
Already talked about our favorite book for 2022. We've talked about our favorite lesson or biggest lesson for 2022. Let's talk about our best strategy for making 2023 an epic 2023.
All right. So, when you have little conversations that really impact your life.
Yes.
3 years ago, I was at a kind of a New Year's mastermind in Dublin, Ireland, and I sat next to a gentleman whose name I can't remember, who owned a restaurant chain, quite a large restaurant chain. And I remember him saying to me, he goes, we were talking about goal setting, and I had all these different roles and goals for these areas. I went, Dan, he goes, let me make it simple for you. He goes, I've got 3 roles in my life. He goes, between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., I'm an athlete. That's the time I take care of my body, like the temple that it all takes part in. Yeah. Between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., I'm a CEO. I'm running the company. I do all the things to do with the business. And between 6 p.m. and midnight, I'm a family man. That's when I'm the father, I'm the husband, and they are the 3 areas. And in each of those 3 areas...
Great time blocking.
Yeah, exactly. In each of those 3 areas, I've got 3 goals. And I went, sometimes there's beauty in getting into the details. Sometimes simple is better because it's just replicable. Yeah. So since that time, I just do this 3 by 3. So in each of those 3 areas, I have 3 goals. It kind of ties in with the Warren Buffett story of he got his pilot said, how do I become successful like you? And he said, well, give me your top 25 goals for your life. And the guy ranked. And he went, great. And then Warren said, right, take your top 5, schedule your life, your calendar around those.
Around those 5.
And then the pilot said, well, what do I do with the 6 through 25? I fit them in around the rest, right? And Warren went, no. That your goals 6 through 25 are on your absolutely not to do list. You actively avoid those because they become a distraction against the most important things in your life. So I focus on the most important. So that kind of dovetailed nicely with this 3 by 3 approach that I learned. And that's what I'm focused on now. So that's part A. And part B for me is versus 10 years ago, I basically don't do goal setting because I'm not anti having a goal. Yeah. But a lot of people have goals and then just miss them altogether. And I learned that if the effect is missing, then so is the cause. So if you haven't got, let's do a simplistic one. If you haven't got, you want 6-pack abs, and if you haven't got 6-pack abs, it's because you're not doing the things that you need to do to get 6-pack abs.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
They'll come if you do the right things.
Correct. So it doesn't matter how good your vision board is, how much you mentally picture it. If you're not eating right and exercising the right way.
But I cut my head and I posted it on the other dude's.
It's a backdrop on my screens even. Yeah. Right. So it's kind of like if you take care of the causes, or fall in love with the causes, with exercising right and eating the right way, the effects will take care of itself. So actually now my 3 by 3, if you look to my list, there might be ways that I measure, the financial success in business, for example, or certain athletic performance. But actually the goals are about the commitment to the habit, the daily and weekly in each of these 3 core areas of my life.
All right. Well, my strategy for 2023 will be an interesting one because, as you well know, I ran for political office some years back. And for me, it really took its toll on me emotionally. And I became very introverted, more so than even normal. I just didn't want to go out and develop some social anxiety. But one of the things that happened when I ran is after I failed, and I failed spectacularly.
You did. In fact, you were the best. You were the most successful political failure I've ever seen.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. That's nothing like a little bit of sympathy for a friend. Actually, no, that wasn't anything like a bit of sympathy for a friend. Thank you. Anyway, so that's not the point. But what I did, though, is I believe when you fail, you should self-reflect. Right. And as I did that, one of the things that came up for me was a bit of an insecurity that I didn't have a formal education. And I was surrounded by all these other people who had these degrees, and I was just like, I got intimidated. Imposter syndrome came up for me, right? So I thought, and this is something I've not publicly announced, by the way, because I've kept it very quiet, but for the past 2 years, this is the first time I've actually publicly discussed it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. For the past 2 years, I've been getting my MBA. And interestingly enough, though, I was surrounded by literally the most amazing brains on the earth.
It's unbelievable. Like, yeah. Some of them are here.
Right? Yeah. This cohort was just fantastic. And I never developed the relationships. Like, I didn't go out to dinners, and I didn't go to the parties, and I didn't go to the bar. And I just put my nose in the books, and I just did my homework. And I developed some friendships with maybe 2 or 3 or 4, right? But not the 70 people that were in my cohort. And they're all amazing, right? And that was a mistake. That was a mistake for me because I didn't foster those relationships. So for me, the strategy is this. Don't focus on setting goals. Focus on establishing relationships. So for me, I'm not setting goals this year. I'm going to establish powerful relationships. I'm going to go back to my core and go, okay, what can I do to foster these relationships? Because much like if you do the things you should do, the abs show up. If you surround yourself with the right people, the goals show up. Right? They happen.
A great example is
right here.
It didn't exist in my world. I couldn't have set a goal. I mean, I suppose I could have, but you wouldn't have known to set it.
You wouldn't have. There's no way your brain, as powerful as you are, there's no way you would have thought, oh, I'm going to set a goal to be at an amazing castle in a foreign country over the hall. I think it just wouldn't have been.
Right.
But the benefits of this. So for me, yeah, that's it. It's about really just making sure you build up the relationships more than the focus on the goals.
Well, that's what I think is the key for this episode. Is really, Ray Dalio's talking about how do you do work that you love, that's meaningful, that you're passionate about, that adds meaning to your life, but also are surrounded by people that you love, that you're passionate about. That's where life gets fun, and then that's you being in the cause, right? And that, for me, that's the fun part. So the distinctions are for the listeners for you to reflect on are. How do you put yourself in an environment that uplifts you, that inspires you, that gives you energy?
Right. Like if you're being an idiot, they can tell you you're being an idiot.
Right. 100%.
Right. So and if you're not thinking you're as good as you are, they say you're better than you think you are.
Exactly right. So the environment is key, and that's a physical environment, proximity, the geographical location, perhaps being in nature, but also surrounded by the people. How do you get yourself around more of the right people? Look, people listening to this all have heard that you become like the 5 people you hang out with. And it's true, and yet it often gets neglected in goals. Yeah. The goals are about
like
things.
Maybe we should be a little more intentional about who those 5 are.
How do you develop that? So there's developing new relationships, but there's also deepening the connection. The chances are there's people that you already know, but you're not aware that they can help transform your move towards your goals. Ultimately, and thirdly, how do you invest in yourself? So back to my lesson, how do you invest in yourself and develop yourself? Because if you develop yourself, put yourself in the right environments to get the self-knowledge, fall in love with the causes, the effects, the outputs. I don't know exactly what they'll be. You might not get exactly what you want, but you could end up with something much better. So, well, with that said, said more succinctly, if you want a better business, you need to become a better business owner.
Well said for a good 2023.
See you next time. I hope you enjoyed that episode. 3 things you need to do now. Number 1, make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss an episode. Also, get on over to Amazon to get a copy of my latest book, Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity, 9.5 Steps to Improving Your Profits and Cash Flow. Also, join our Facebook group, the Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity community, to connect with other business owners.